Hi everyone and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where 2 1/3 Pro Tools experts demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in Avid's official Facebook support forums. Please welcome Anders Motz.
Hello.
Andy Hageman.
How you doing?
And myself, Dave the Third, to take you deep into the working of Pro Tools technique and ethos to help the user community get the best out of our chosen, probably our most favoritist ever DAW. In this question, or rather in this week's episode, we're going to be looking at a question from Spencer from the Pro Tools Users Forum, and he asks this. I'm upgrading my Studio 2 and HD systems so Atmos can be used. I want to go from a Mac Studio Ultra, we think that's the M1 Ultra, the HDX Thunderbolt PCI card chassis to the Avid Matrix and use Dante to route out the audio. Is this a good idea? Anders will definitely tell you. Or am I missing anything? Any other gear I need to make this work other than speakers? And considering that Anders is pretty much immersed over at Tonquerf, literally and figuratively, I think Anders has got all of the answers to life on this one.
Yeah. I think it's a great question, a question that comes up a lot. There is a huge interest in Dolby Atmos related things right now.
Including from me. This is the route that I want to go down pretty soon, so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Great. Yeah, so there are a couple of options as some of the comments are, and the two main options are really to either do everything in one computer using the so-called internal renderer, or having the Dolby production suite running on the same computer as your Pro Tools system. And then there are two versions of the plugin that you will use to forward sound from Pro Tools into the renderer, which obviously renders all of the audio then. And so two different methods there, and none of them is perfect. It's a very cheap, or relative speaking, a very cheap solution, but there are some limitations of using both of those technologies. And then there's a third option, which is the correct way to do it, or not the correct, but actually the
it's recommended by Dolby, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean the way that you should go if you're mixing stuff professionally for post-production or something like that. You definitely need two computers, one running the external renderer. And let's talk about the internal renderer first. Andy, what's the advantage of running an internal renderer on one computer?
Well, more than anything else, it's cost, right? Because you don't have to have any external hardware. It's a relatively simpler thing to take care of. You just have the two different devices. You've got audio being connected between Pro Tools and the renderer software through a thing called the Dolby Audio Bridge, and you've got the timing is taken care of by LTC coming from Pro Tools into the renderer, and that LTC plugin just resides on a track inside your Pro Tools session. So it's a very simple way to set things up. It's also less expensive because you only have one computer. It's arguably more portable because you have one computer. Those are the advantages, but obviously when you have more extensive software running on a single computer, you run into just, how far can you go with a big session and so on and so forth.
Yeah, right now I'm showing the internal renderer using Dolby Audio Bridge as the playback engine in Pro Tools, which is basically forwarding 130 channels into the renderer, one of those being the LTC for synchronization into the renderer. And so Dolby Audio Bridge will be my playback engine, and that forwards the signal into the renderer. So if I look into the renderer's preferences here, we can see the audio input device is the Dolby Audio Bridge. And then the renderer will actually use my Pro Tools HDX card as the output device. And that doesn't have to be HDX. For me it is, because I've got an HDX. But that could be any interface that has the ability to output enough channels for Dolby Atmos. So if you've got something else going, that could be it.
Or binaural.
Yeah, of course, you could do this binaurally, just using your headphones as well, which isn't the recommended method to do this. But one serious disadvantage of this setup, looking at the Dolby Audio Bridge, is that my Pro Tools HDX card is in use by the renderer. And that means that I cannot use the Sync HD that I need for synchronizing Pro Tools to picture and other computers and things like that. And that's one huge disadvantage of this setup. So depending on what your goals are, this has some serious drawbacks. I said that there is another version of this as well, and that is using something called the send and return plugins as your audio input device. And in that case, you can send stuff from Pro Tools into the renderer and back using the send and return plugin. But that one makes using the delay compensation engine in Pro Tools unavailable, which is a huge no-go for me. So I obviously need the delay compensation engine, because anytime you do any kind of internal routing or add an effect or something, you will have latency. And if that's not automatically compensated for, I'm not in anymore. So Dolby Audio Bridge is the option for doing this internally, but it has its drawbacks. So the other option for someone that is building a system is to use an external renderer. Basically having a computer outside of your standard computer, and that is running the renderer instead. And in this case, you can use your HDX card or HDX cards. Actually, you would, in a perfect world, you would need 2 HDX cards, because only 2 HDX cards can output the 128 channels of output that you need for all of your beds and objects. As we can see here in the renderer, I've got room for 128 channels. Right now I've got 4 beds here and a couple of objects. And to output all of these, I would need 2 HDX cards. And those HDX cards would output signal either through MADI or using the Dante protocol, depending on what setup you're going for, and then transfer that over either the MADI connection or a network over to the second computer. That would then render everything using the renderer, and then going back into the Matrix or the Matrix Studio or whatever your interface is, and playing back the audio signal. Having the Matrix or the Matrix Studio, by the way, makes everything really easy for monitoring purposes. You've got a monitor controller that can handle Dolby Atmos, which a lot of interfaces do not have. So it certainly makes it easier. But even the Matrix Studio, as great as it sounds, it only has 64 channels of Dante, meaning in this situation, for instance, this small little thing that I'm working on here, I've got 86 channels going into the renderer. So the Matrix Studio would not do it, sending Dante into the external renderer. Andy, anything you would like to add to this?
Well, yeah, and I think I didn't take a look at the question directly, but I think, Anders, you said that there was some folks saying you don't need HDX to do Dante or to do Atmos, and in order to do the external renderer, which is arguably the it's where you want to be if you're going to use have a big session. It's definitely the recommended way to go from Dolby's perspective. If you're going to go that route, you do need an HDX system for 2 reasons. One, you need it because of the number of counts, but you also need to be able to clock, right? And so the rendering computer and the Pro Tools computer that you're running on need to be running off the same word clock. And of course, to do that, you need an HDX system with a Sync HD or a Sync X.
Yeah. So there's a cheap way to do this, everything internally, which has its limitations. And then there is the more expensive route, but which gives you all of the capabilities of the Dolby Atmos. Yeah. Dave, since do you have any questions? Because you are for you, I guess most of this is a bit new. So what comes into your mind? Anything that we need to clear out more specifically?
From my perspective, I want to know how to do it for music, and what isn't clear from the question is whether he wants to have a setup for mixing movies, or whether he wants to just be able to mix in Dolby Atmos for music, and possibly for Apple's spatial audio delivery.
Yeah, great question, and I think that has something to do with the setup that he needs to go for, probably. But the mixing in Dolby Atmos is really no different if you're mixing music or if you're mixing for picture. In itself, the renderer looks the same. There's a music panner plugin, for instance, that you could use that has panner movements locked in time with the tempo of your song. But other than that, there are no real huge differences. But of course, I mean, if you're talking about using the Dante Virtual Studio, only limiting yourself to 64 channels of communication, maybe that is okay for music. Maybe you're only going for one bed and a number of objects, 54 objects, or that would leave you. So that would probably be okay for most people mixing Dolby Atmos for music.
And let's talk. Go ahead.
Oh no, and Andy mentioned something before, and that is you can even output the entire mix through the renderer as a binaural mix. So you only sit and mix in your headphones, and that will give you all of the things running around your head, hopefully using binaural audio.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, I think it's something that you can do. You can go only so far with a binaural mix, and you want to double check it. Just one thing, because I think a lot of people who are starting with this don't have really a sense of what beds versus objects are, right? And just to go back to, if you could, take a look at the renderer again, Anders, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So in the renderer, you'll see the first 4 rows of those dots, right, have these purple boxes around them. And that tells the renderer that those channels are 4 blocks of beds. And a bed, basically, honestly, a bed is what we've been working with this whole time. It's a normal traditional mix where you pan stuff and it encodes it to the channels. There's no objects, there's no live rendering really. It's just your stereo mix or your multi-channel mix or whatever mapped to however many channels.
Channel-based mix, basically.
It's what we've been doing the whole 9 yards. It's what you've been doing up to this point. And those are great for certain things, but for other things you want to have the discrete control of objects. And the objects are what we have from, I think I'm seeing number 41 up to 86. Those are objects, and those basically, that's what's really being rendered, right? So that's the stuff that's actually being in real time positioned from one place to another place. I don't want to say from one channel to another channel, because that's really not the way things work with objects. But you can see here also that Anders is very, very graciously being a good driver here. You could see here on the input which of these are objects and which of these are beds. And one of the things you can do, and the only reason why I mention this, is that you can kind of, and Anders, tell me if you disagree with this, but you can kind of make more out of less the more you mix with beds, the more you can get away with, because the renderer is not doing as much. Would you agree with that, Anders?
Yeah, in terms of how much performance you get out of your computer. Yeah,
right, that's what I'm saying.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, in that case, yeah, and you can see I'm running this off of the same machine. It's a Mac Pro. It's an old computer, a hex core, and just idling the renderer right now consumes about 13 to 14% of the CPU power, and now nothing is playing on this computer, by the way. So obviously I've got Zoom running and I've got Pro Tools running, but Pro Tools is obviously not playing back right now. So as Andy alludes here, I mean, if you use a lot of objects, a lot of panning, and a lot of things happening, and you're also performing a lot of tasks in the background in the render, like metering and things like that, or binaural processing, you will you might run out of power depending on your computer. But to be fair, I mean, he's using probably the most powerful computer out there right now, the M1 Ultra, which is a horsepower machine, and I bet you he's got the memory for it as well. So
He might just.
so he's probably okay.
Just so you can see what that looks like in Pro Tools, can you show the difference between object and bed assignments?
Yeah. So in Pro Tools here, this is a little bit of a mock-up thing here, but right now this track here, which is a 712 rendered audio track, is output through a bed, and some of the tracks further down below are outputted as objects, as you would see here. And in this setup I/O, we can really see that the same setup that I have in the render will match the setup right here. So I've got 4 beds of 712 channel format. So I've got these positioned right here. So they are basically using up my 40 first output channels of Pro Tools. And then my objects start here. And as you can see, as I scroll down here, these will start using objects and ending on output number 86 here. So one of other output is needed, and that's for the LTC plugin that is an audio signal being sent to the renderer. Yeah, and in the bus page you can see that these beds are actually mapped into the renderer as well. So these setups obviously need to be exactly the same in Pro Tools and in the renderer.
And this is why we love session templates so much these days.
Totally. Yeah, but it's actually not that huge of a problem. Me personally, I will set up the input configuration in the renderer to whatever I need. And then I can just default to use the Dolby Atmos renderer to create the output assignments in Pro Tools, which is a really, really quick way to do this. Yeah, I hope we answered your question there. Dave, so looking at this, what would be the setup for you?
I have to admit I'd need to do it as small and as cost effectively as possible.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie.
using the internal renderer. Yeah.
Yeah. So just walk me through what additional stuff I need, Anders, in that case, because I'm working on HD native at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I have my Omni, so I have the outputs available. I can buy the renderer, and I have Pro Tools Ultimate.
Yeah, so first off, you do not have the outputs available right now because the Omni only has 8 outputs, and you will need a full 10 outputs at least. So you need a 714 configuration.
Do you know that's actually a good point? And whenever I think about wanting to mix in 5.1, I'm in surround. Sorry, I have 5.1 in my head. I don't have Atmos in my head. I don't have all of the 360 degree stuff. So you're absolutely right.
So the lowest configuration that you should have using speakers is a 714, meaning 7 speakers as a 7, 2 in the front, center, then 2 on the sides, and 2 in the rear, and then the low frequency effect. So that would be 8 channels, and then you should ideally have at least 4 overhead speakers. So that would be 12 outputs. So your Omni doesn't give you what you need here. So you would either add an interface to that configuration, maybe 192, like we talked about last week.
Oh, you have a couple of those.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those. I'll send you one.
He's doing the sales thing really subtly, Andy. You can tell.
And Dave, we talked a little bit about the monitor controller, and there's a really cheap way to do this. So if you look in the render, there's actually a tiny little attenuation knob, which is a monitor controller. You can use a dim switch to dim it down. You can mute individual beds or objects. So this can actually be used. So, I mean, I started out doing this. I had two 192s, and they went full. All of the speakers were turned up full, and I just used this button to control the playback volume of the renderer. And every time I switched the system on, I just prayed that I hadn't forgotten anything. And a couple of times it just blasted full.
Whoa!
Fully out here. And I think that was in a couple of the early recordings that we did with Pro Tools Answers as well. But that happened to, whoa! There was a sound coming from the overheads. But you can do it, and that would be the absolute cheapest way.
So I tend to record probably about 70. I think the biggest track session I've made so far is 70 tracks max. I think I'd be recording with beds. I'm not sure I'd be doing stuff with objects.
I'm sure you would be doing objects because objects have greater resolution. They are, as Andy said before, a bed is like a channel-based format, so it's fixed positions basically. Whereas when you pan an object, that will actually have an XYZ position moving around in the sound field, and that will also mean that whenever this is played back on a different sized system, and that could be a bigger system as a theater or something, that XYZ position will always be correctly translated into that system. Whereas the bed audio is more a diffuse sound field that will in some cases use more speakers and will have less XYZ accuracy of course. And speaking of that, 712 is the biggest bed channel format, meaning that for the overheads you only have one side to the right and one side to the left. You do not have any front and back in the overheads, for instance.
Okay.
So you'll probably use a bunch of objects as well, and some people mixing music only use objects because of the better accuracy and you can play stuff.
Which leads us to another thing too, is speakers, right?
Yeah.
What else do I need? I think because there's a binaural output, people think maybe they can do the whole thing with just their headphones. Trust me, you won't be satisfied with that. Just because there's going to be a translation issue. There's a gap there. As good as the binaural monitoring is, it's not what you want to do. So what you're going to need to do is A, get the speakers that you need, and B, and this is where I'm going to stand on my soapbox, the room cannot be too small. It needs some space to grow. I've been in a couple of dub studios with the overhead speakers, and the ceiling was too low, and it was impossible to get a good sense of things because the walls were nice and wide, but the ceiling was too low, which meant that those speakers were too close to me, and I wasn't getting a good sense. So you need to give those speakers, and this is my opinion, feel free to disagree with it, you need to have enough space for those channels to sit properly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in a perfect scenario would place your listening position at equidistance from all of the loudspeakers. So the distance to all of those loudspeakers should be the same. You can compensate for something like that in the renderer if there are a couple of different. You would do that in the speaker calibration. So you can compensate for different latencies because of relative distance to yourself, so you can compensate for some, but as Andy says, if your overhead speakers are too close to you, you won't.
So where's your listening position, Anders, in relation to all of your speakers?
Okay, so for me, I've got this amazing thing here going where I'm almost perfectly equidistant to everything.
Almost perfectly. He doesn't want to admit
so
Andy.
I basically took
perfection's
my
just
measuring tape, and I'm close to, within a couple of centimeters of being equidistant from everything.
He's just like Mary Poppins, Andy. He's practically perfect.
Practically perfect.
No, I'm not.
You know, that's exactly something a practically perfect person would say.
You were too
But no,
kind to me today.
this is the thing, though, is that you don't want to sink all your money into an HDX system and get with the Dante and all of that other stuff, and then find out that the room you're in doesn't translate. That because translation's the whole point behind Dolby, is that by getting away from channel-based audio, by getting to object-based audio, we can finally get things to sound as good as possible in a wide range of theaters, that's the seminal idea behind Dolby. And if you don't have a room that is at least in that ballpark, you're at a huge disadvantage. And it's one of those aspects that I think not enough people give not enough priority to. That's my soapbox, and I'm off it now.
I know you're absolutely right, but then there's another thing also, and that is in Dolby Atmos setup, every channel is full range, meaning you can basically pull out full range audio, meaning the entire frequency spectrum. The LFE is just a low frequency effect, and that's also something that's worth considering. Like when you're building your system, obviously you want a high resolution loudspeaker that is good quality, but also that you have some extension in the bass domain so that you can actually hear sounds coming out of them.
What's your, as far as we're going way into the weeds, but what's your favorite speaker for channels in using Dolby?
There are so many great alternatives. I'd love to have the Neumann's the 310. That would be a fantastic solution, but quite pricey. So I've got some really cheap speakers myself. So I've got speakers from a company called Fluid Audio, and they the beautiful thing about these, the one thing that, or the two things that sold them to me, or three things actually, is one of the coax design, because the tweeter is in the woofer, meaning that the cabinet itself shrinks from being E-high to being a lot smaller. They're still pretty bulky speakers, but not to the point that they should have been for how deep they can play because of that. So they play fairly deep, and then they had this really great mounting system that you could buy extra for almost no money at all. That would allow me to mount these speakers in the ceiling, because a lot of speakers out there don't have a ceiling mount option. So you'd have to come up with some solution for that yourself. But these had this like very cheap little bracket that you could buy, and you could place your speaker and then tilt it and turn it in every direction, which was and of course then there was the price. I was limited in funds when I built this, and I got a great deal on these speakers, and I think they sound great for the price paid. They are excellent.
But you get a lot of work out of it, so you're obviously doing it right. And I was listening to a really interesting interview that Sound on Sound ran with Bob Clearmountain a couple of weeks ago. They put it out as a podcast, and Bob, whenever he mixes a record, apparently he makes a 5.1 mix at the same time as making a stereo mix. Really interesting way of using his Send system.
I don't think he only does that, because I saw a YouTube interview with Bob Clearmountain just the other day, and he said that he mixes everything in Atmos these days.
Okay, I may have just missed the specific format, but whenever I hear surround sound, I think 5.1, so you'll have to forgive me. But he was saying that he doesn't use any particularly clever or interesting speakers. They're just nothing special speakers that he has.
Well, he's using the Dyne Audio BM15As, which is the stereo pair that I have. So those are the ones that he uses. Okay. But one thing which makes Dolby Atmos so great, and please, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's the approach to your mixes, which is mix once and get all of your deliverables. So basically you mix for Dolby Atmos using objects and beds and whatnot, and then from the render you can output re-renders, which is basically a channel-based formats of that mix. So in this case, for instance, I'm doing offline re-renders of the 5.1 mix, just the dialogue in English, and I'm doing a stereo mix, just the dialogue in English. Then I'm doing a 5.1 re-render, music and effects, and I'm doing a stereo music and effects, and then I'm doing a live loudness re-render as well. And I could keep on adding these re-renders. So I could output like a 7.1 mix, I could do a 5.1, I could do a stereo, or any other channel-based format in just one key press, and
the quality is preserved. And the quality is preserved in a way that you can't do with your the kind of down mixing and simulated surround and all the tricks that we do with channel-based audio inside of Pro Tools or any other DAW. This is completely different, and this is, by the way, Dave, why you might be using more objects than you think you're going to, because the whole idea behind objects is you're not panning it to the left speaker. You're panning it left, and it tells you what speaker's going to play. Yep. That's what the renderer's job is, right? So, and so it, first of all, it makes monitoring, if you've got a good room, monitoring is a breeze, and you know it's going to translate well. Playback is consistently good in a theatrical environment, and because nothing really is etched in stone until you etch it, this re-rendering allows you to do really high quality, different channel-based versions, and you'd be surprised at how good the results are. I mean, Anders, am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And Andy, as Andy says here, like the mix once approach. Right now, this is my physical setup. So you can see the 7.1 configuration out there, and these are the ceiling speakers. But at any time, I can change my monitoring to any other format. So I can listen to my mix being re-rendered in 7.1 or 5.1 or stereo just by the hit of a button. Actually, you're using only the 1 through whatever keys on the numeric keypad, switches you between all of your different things that you have set up. So I can sit and listen to the entire mix in Atmos, and then switch and listen. This is what it sounds like in stereo. This is what it sounds like in 5.1. And instantly that will switch. So it's an amazing solution.
And by the way, just so you who are looking at the video, Anders doesn't have an LFE in front of his center channel.
No. Physically, it's placed actually just below it. So these are not configurable the way
it's on his desk. It's on his desk.
It's on his desk.
A monitor.
Because you want to get the punch.
Yeah.
He
puts his coffee
saying
on.
that you were wanting to say that Bob Clearmountain has just normal, speakers that he's using. I was in a room down in Australia. This is a college, right? Colleges are always worried about budgets, and they had a bunch of the Yamaha HS8s, which are good speakers, but they're not expensive, right? They're not the premium gold-plated brands, right? But they're workhorses, and I was astonished. They had that with a matrix, and it was absolutely glorious. Because, as you said, that all these channels are full range, and I was really surprised at how good that sounded. And with the HS8s, you're not gonna break any banks.
Yeah, there are certainly better speakers, but that comes at the cost, and obviously you need 12 of them. Or
there's always going to be something better. For me, I'm looking at expanding my Adam A7X because I've got two of those that I really like. So I was just going to double down, triple down, quadruple down on those. And hope for the best.
There are so many great alternatives out there, and I see a lot of Genelecs in a lot of setups at colleges and universities and professional studios as well. So there are certainly great options.
Dave, more questions?
I don't have any more. Andy, give me a question to ask Anders. This is interesting because you're asking me to ask something I don't know anymore, right? But I guarantee you, if I went on one of Anders' Dolby training courses, I have answers to questions I didn't even know I had. It's one of the things I love about training, right? And going to physical courses with people, because it answers questions I don't even know I had.
Which I guess leads us to with the Avid advertisement. If you're, we're all three of us are Avid certified instructors. I work for Avid, and we do have in the Avid Learning Series, we have a Dolby Atmos course, a pair of two that lead to official Dolby Atmos certification. These courses were created by Dolby and tweaked by us. Anders has a lot of contributions into the creation of that as well. And it's a solid course. So if you want to study formally, finding an Avid Learning partner that's offering that is one way to not only get a solid broad education, Dave, as you said, it'll raise and then answer questions that aren't even occurring to you right now, but you'll get Dolby official certification at the end if you pass the exam.
Yeah, so I really want to jump into one of Anders' courses, not necessarily for the certification anyway, just for the knowledge, because I don't know what I don't know, and it's I'm
for the knowledge, stay
I'm
for the certification.
looking at doing this over the next year or so, because my ultimate goal is mixing spatial audio, getting into Avid's Apple's spatial audio thing. I just find that so fascinating, and time is going to be an issue for me. I don't think it's going to be a quick process, but I'll get there eventually. So it'll be a little bit of a slow thing for me, but I think at some point, if I can jump into an Anders course,
there you go.
Yeah, actually, I think, and I'm not trying to promote my own courses here, but that any learning partner offering these courses, you will get the same great service, of course. And one thing that is really good with these courses is that you learn about every possible configuration using Dolby Atmos. So it's actually a good idea to start with the course before you start spending your money, because you might find out there are ways to do this, and depending on what your goals are, there are alternative routes. So I think you should definitely check out the course before you start spending money.
Yeah, I'm not shilling, by the way. It's a genuine belief that even if you don't want to go for certifications for things, just going on the courses will teach you stuff you had no idea you had questions about.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we just scratched the surface here, obviously, today. Just opened the little box, and there is so much more in there. Yeah.
And as it wasn't a little box, it was a freaking massive box.
And we do offer online courses. Avid does offer public professional training. I know that our friend Chris is doing one down here in Asia for our time zone. But anybody, it's an online course, and anybody can enroll. And just go to the Avid website and click I think it's Learn from Avid or something like that. I should probably know what the link is.
Well, being the training manager for
and actually one of the instructors that are teaching these courses for Avid. So with any luck, I might meet you there. So let me know if you've seen this video in that case.
And maybe it helped make a decision.
So if you go to avid.com, click Get Help, and then Learn from Avid, and then find a course. So, Get Help.
I'll try to paste this link into the comments below. So have a look there. Hopefully, it's there.
It's easier just to go to tonquafert.au. .com.
Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right, Andy. There are two ways to do this course. You can either do it at any learning partner offering this course as a short course or as a university course, or you can take it directly from Avid, which is the professional version of this course. So
it's the same content.
Yeah. But it's the same material.
Cool. Right. Enough promoting Anders, Andy.
Promoting.
Let's get off. You can go and have tea. I can go and have a brew. Nice. Thank you so much to Anders for going through all of that, and obviously thank you to Andy as well.
You bet.
If you got a lot out of this video, you could like it, to start off with. That really helps us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. You can hit the bell icon that will tell you every time we release new videos. It's usually weekly. You can head over to ProToolsAnswers.com and you can subscribe over there, and Andy will send you some emails every so often to let you know what we're up to. And you can also subscribe to our Inner Circle over there as well, where you'll receive things like monthly masterclasses with one, two, or all of us in various configurations, and access to our Inner Circle community, our Discord community, which is growing and
it's very alive.
It's great to
Great
exist
fun,
in
yeah.
there. And some other benefits that come with that. You can head over to ProToolsAnswers.com and you can have a look over there to see what it's all about. So while you guys go do that, I'm going to say bye. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you to both of you for all of your wizardry knowledge. You guys make me better every Thursday afternoon, and then Sunday mornings when I have to mix it.
Thank you for doing so, Dave.
We will see you all next time. My name's Dave. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we're out.